Good morning, everybody. Guten Morgen, and welcome to Tech Talk. So I've got the honor and the privilege to kick it off, and I think we're going to have a fun session this morning. We're going to keep it exciting, and we've certainly got some exciting speakers in Quay and Karina to stir your thoughts. And I do look forward to some Q&A at the end. We're pretty generous with time. We've got about an hour up here for presentations and a little discussion and some initial Q&A perhaps that I'll spark it off with. But we do have another 45 minutes before the next session, which is the Cool Tech session at 12. So we're not too compressed for time. So I really want to open up to the floor afterwards. So please take notes and think about something that really concerns you, that sparks off from the presentations that Quay and Karina will discuss. So the session is, it's about digitalization, it's about resilience, it's about how do we apply this tech in a smart way to improve not only the efficiency of our ports and terminals, but also the bottom line. Look, at the end of the day, we are a business. We're all businesses here that we're representing. We want to do things sustainably. It's shareholder value, doing things in the right way for the community and for the greater good of shipping. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about trust. Do we have actually trust in our systems? There are many systems out there. There are, thousands of lines of code out there running these fabulous technological advances that that all these OEMs are selling around now. I don't think there's a piece of kit out there that probably doesn't have a chip in it nowadays. But is there resilience and trust? And in terms of risk matrix, we all produce risk matrices for our companies and for our projects. What is the likelihood that something's going to happen? And what's the impact on your business, especially when you implement new technology? Clean data, machine learning. What is the impact of not having clean data that the machine is learning from bad data? That clearly is going to have an impact or slow down the machine learning process. Applying artificial intelligence, AI, buzzword, hype. 2 years ago, I was speaking on this platform about blockchain. Blockchain, where's that gone? I don't hear that one anymore, but I'm sure it'll pop up during the course of the next hour. Resiliency, I mentioned, digital twins, predictive maintenance, redundancy, and something Karina just mentioned to me. Are we building these tools and then finding a job for them to do? Or are we coming up with the purpose case and then trying to find a tool to fit the purpose? So there's something to think about. Anyway, enough of me. I'll now invite up the experts. So Quay and Karina, if you could join me on the stage, please. Round of applause, please, for our speakers. So our first speaker today is Quay Tran. Quay is from DP World and is leading the ports and terminals transformation for technology and technology function and innovation at DP World. He focuses on cyber and he focuses on digitalization, sustainability initiatives. For many years now, actually in the last 3 years, Quay has been listed in the top 30 of the leading tech experts in the CIO UK top 30 index. So we certainly got somebody who knows what he's talking about here for sure. And in information systems management, he's a fellow of the British Computer Society, a chartered engineer, and a chartered fellow of the Management Institute. So I think we have an awesome opportunity here to listen from somebody who has senior leadership and practical experience of implementing these systems and driving change forward. Quay, can I introduce you onto the podium, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. Thank you and good morning to you all. And thank you for joining us at TOC Europe 2024. And especially for the plenary session. I know it's the first session of the entire day, the entire event, and it takes quite a while just to get here from the entrance. So you're either all super keen or just already tired actually walking in from there. But thank you nonetheless for being here. Oops. So, I mean, Paul's given a fantastic intro already, so I don't think I need to say many more to introduce myself. I'm really here today to talk about the maritime trade landscape, its current success, and the potential we bring for time, cost, and environment efficiencies and so forth. It's a pleasure for me today to be in the company of Paul and Karina, and also so many decision makers, policy experts, and solution providers. I'm also joined this week by my colleagues at DP World. So our Global Executive Vice President of Operations and Engineering, Mr. Maxim Mihic, will be here. Also, Andy Tam, who leads our Global Energy Management, will be here as well as many other colleagues. So I do hope you'll also be able to make time to go and attend their sessions as well, and also visit our stand here at TOC. So as a leading provider of smart logistics solutions, these are our core pillars of our business. Obviously, historically known as a ports and terminals operator. In recent times, expanding across the end-to-end supply chain. I won't read for every word up there. I'll give you a bit of time to read through that. At the same time, technology and digital is core to the transformation of our business and also, the industry as a whole. And for us, all this allows us to enable goods to travel seamlessly around the world, creating a sustainable trade infrastructure for today and for tomorrow. So our ports and terminals helps businesses streamline customer operations, lower their cost, and reduce their environmental impact. So, going back a little bit. So, a few stats up there. Again, I won't read it. I'll let you have a look at those yourselves. But as the leading provider of smart logistics solutions and our network of port terminals, marine logistics, and digital solutions, technology into innovation and engineering excellence enables us to keep at the leading edge with fit-for-purpose, efficient and sustainable and intelligent delivery systems, such as cargoes, which I'll go into later on, sea rates, and also the transformative high bay storage solutions, such as Box Bay, which is also here at TOC Europe. So, when I stood here at this stage for the first time a year ago, I predicted greater efficiencies, not for just how trade flows, from the factory floor to the customer door, but also its environmental impact as well. At the time, it was a prediction, but now it was also more of a plan on how DP World ourselves would use technology to enhance the seamless flow of trade. So I'm pleased to announce that we've made significant progress on this journey, and it is a journey. It's not a one-time change, as we all know. Things take time in maritime and ports and logistics, but we have made significant progress. And I'll just like to highlight some of that here. So again, I won't read through all of that. I'll let you have a chance to look through that. And a lot of this has been enabled by our own digital evolution and the increased uptake in technology adoption throughout the world's supply chains. And furthermore, with the IMO resolution this year making the year of the maritime single window across the sector, I think it's encouraging to see more collaboration and the use of technology to gain the efficiencies that are going to become more commonplace across the board in the industry. So in the UK, our modal shift program was launched in September last year. Since then, the share of rail freight in Southampton has increased by over 60%. So obviously rail is the most sustainable inland form of mass transportation for goods and so forth. And so it's shifting from, more carbon-intensive modes of transportation to lower and more sustainable modes of transportation, which is fantastic news. And the scheme incentivizes customers, if they move their import-laden containers via rail, it would probably take about 300,000 truck journeys off the roads each year, just in Southampton. And that's one of our 2 terminals in the UK. And that's the equivalent of saving about 6,400 tons of carbon dioxide from the first 6 months since we launched last year, and that's equivalent to more than the entire CO2 outputs of the terminal itself. So that's 6,400 tons. So you want to see what 1 ton of CO2 looks like? It actually looks like that. So that's 6,400, yeah? So I know, we're here to talk about, this ports and terminals, technology, equipment, and so forth. But let's first address the elephant in the room, so to speak, AI. So obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI in the last, I would say, 12, 24 months. I think, from my perspective, I think generative AI is what really brought AI to the forefront of everyone. Something like ChatGPT and other generative AI technologies, I would say, has probably been, the iPhone moment for AI in the adoption and use and so forth of that technology. And obviously it has great capability to dissect vast amounts of data and automate processes and so forth in a sector especially like ours. And if we look at data, I think a stat I have was about out of all the data that we generate in our businesses, after we've generated for the first time, we only actually ever come back to 3% of that data. So there's still a vast opportunity of that data that's untapped. And something like AI can definitely help in that respect. And I think Paul also mentioned it, right? But is it just a new buzzword, right? Is it just something that comes and goes? If you look at something like blockchain, as Paul's mentioned, it was once considered a groundbreaking technology, for all industries, but particularly in an industry where historically we have not collaborated as much as we wanted to. Yeah, so it promised this trustless world in ports and shipping and so forth, but blockchain itself, I think the last few years has become blocked chain. I mean, it stopped, right? It's pretty much paused. Some things are still happening in the background. It will have its use cases, but to all intents and purposes, it's pretty much reached a roadblock, particularly for our industry. Whereas I believe AI's capabilities are generally transformative, and we know this because we've been looking at AI for quite some time now at DP World in the development of our technology suite, and particularly our cargo suite, which is up there. And again, I won't run through that in any detail. You can look at that up there. Say Cargo's Flow, that uses AI to combine multiple data sources to provide real-time visibility of cargo. Also automates consolidation of multiple documents from multiple industry providers and so forth, making it a single platform for cargo tracking with more accurate predictions and so forth. And likewise, our Cargo's community platform standardizes processes across geographies, introducing the single window that will see progress and gain more momentum in this year. In this instance, something like AI cuts out administrative and compliance hours and really simplifying the flow of goods for all stakeholders and governments concerned. So my colleagues at P&O Maritime Logistics have also had success creating their own AI chatbots to assist with safety and response in their vessels. I think we talked about safety being quite a big thing. Obviously, we've got the safety village over there. So IASA offers 24/7 assistance to crews for health and safety queries, acting as a single source for all the company's safety protocols. So since its launch last year, it's helped us get about 60% of the work done instantly. Historically would have been manual, interactions and so forth. And so allowing teams to remain on their specialist requirements and work much quicker. Efficiency obviously is what we're looking at for AI. And a lot of times I think we get confused. We think of AI as a displacing technology, as in, will my job be taken over by AI? I think that's a question that's come up quite a few times in the last period. I think, we really need to look at it more of a enabling or complementing technology. Actually, how does it help our people and our business and our operations and industry work better and so forth? And that's, I think, where the true value of AI is for our industry. I think for us, everyone in this room, I think, aspires when it comes to considering tech with their operations. At the time when I think about 64% of the supply chain is still using paper in a lot of our operational processes. And I think about 80% of sort of businesses in our industry stating that they do not have a suitable or, fit for purpose technology system to automate their processes. I think looking at AI is going to fundamentally change and transform our industry. Another opportunity of AI is, of course, smarter working. Obviously, digitalization enables ports and terminals to become sort of the crucial links for a port-centric approach to the supply chain, rather than a choke point that it's sometimes envisaged as, where kind of this mysterious black box where containers come in and you don't really know about them for a while. From our position as an asset owner within the supply chain, this is providing vital in DP World's mission to ensure the trade can flow seamlessly end to end. So take our terminal operating system, utilizing technology and AI and so forth to create digital twin, as we've done at our state-of-art terminal in Jebel Ali, to give real-time insight as to where cargo is and also the operations in our business and foreseeing issues before they arise to prevent incidents, but also unnecessary wastage and so forth. And the combination of data use and automation, I think, is essential for our business, especially as we move more along the end-to-end supply chain and our new freight forwarding hubs globally, where we actually coordinate and orchestrate a lot of the flow of containers and so forth. And this transparency to data gives us, a lot of insight into this increasingly interconnected sector. It's called a supply chain. So, when a link in that chain breaks, obviously it's of no benefit to anyone. So obviously, we need to make sure that this chain, is strong and connects and has that sufficient resilience. And I think technology will help enable that as well. And I think we encourage the rollout of digitalization across ports and terminals, moving more to standards and so forth as well. I think this will help, trade flow further, more sustainably and more securely as well. Oh, sorry. So this brings me on to my next point, which is digitalization and the impact and environmental impact, of trade. And obviously tech allows us to tap into how our industry works. We actually look at the data we create, as I said earlier, where we're only looking at about 3% of that today. So in Rotterdam World Gateway, obviously we are here. Obviously, some of you may have gone to another terminal on the other side as well yesterday. But we like to think of Rotterdam World Gateway as world leading, which is obviously now entirely automated, but also using 100% renewable electricity to run our yard and quayside operations. And the evolution of the terminal is based on the data we've gleaned about the impacts of our services and how to optimize an ideal terminal that's both electrified and automated and sustainable. So likewise in DP World Southampton in the UK, we've eradicated the use of diesel in what was probably not thought as possible, probably about 2 years ago. In a more traditional straddle carrier terminal with legacy equipment, we're now running electricity, all our equipment, or HVO, so hydrogenated vegetable oil, to run all our equipment in that terminal. And I've also mentioned the use of data from a digitalized approach on the modal shift program in the UK. And as part of our commitment to these digitally enhancing and sustainable industries, we've joined ZEPA, the Zero Emissions Port Alliance, along with our colleagues at APMT. So my colleague Andy Tam will also be talking about that later this week. to look at electrifying port equipment and drastically reducing the carbon emissions that's required in our industry. And in the same vein, as of this year, so DP World has now become a signatory of TIC 4.0, which we are looking at rolling out as we see that as a core enabler of the expansion of digitalization across our business industry. So that's where we use these technologies and these standards to become a more efficient organization and industry going forwards. We're also using technology to change how people access trade on the world stage as well. So World Logistics Passport is our global virtual loyalty program to overcome non-tariff trade barriers, fast-tracking cargo movement in all members, reducing administrative costs, advancing cargo information, and facilitating the movement between cargo in ports and also air and transportation. So obviously these allow businesses and also countries as well to take advantage of commercial opportunities and improve their resilience. So likewise, Sea Rates is our online marketplace for freight forwarding, giving shipping options across a network of 45,000 freight forwarders and over 400,000 shippers. So that's over 10 million shipping routes on one platform, including services by us as well as our peers. And DP World Logistics is our online cargo booking platform, and that now has a carbon footprint calculator, which is GLEC accredited, so providing great tracking visibility for your carbon footprint, for your end-to-end cargo movements, and so forth. And that's why I think, a wholly digitalized marketplace is not an option, but also a necessity for our industry. And we know that, digitalization will create cost efficiencies and time efficiencies, as well as, providing a more sustainable industry, sort of mandated, but at the same time something that we want to steer towards as well. But it does require collaboration and also financial backing and investment to take forwards. Oops. And that's why collaboration amongst ourselves as DP World, but also many of you in this room today and across our industry is vital. I think if we're to realize a trade where world trade is a source of prosperity for all, both financially, societally, and environmentally, I think partnerships and collaborations are key. So I've got a short video which I'll play now. Sound. See if there's any sound. Okay, thank you for that. So to finish off, sorry, I need to stand here, don't I? So Mark Zuckerberg has this now famous quote, to move fast and break things. I think with the right investment in technology and a commitment to a better future, I think a more agreeable and sustainable perspective would be to move fast, move smart, and fix things. Thank you.
Great job, Quay. Thank you very much, Quay. Well, there's some food for thought. That's some stimulating words to start your minds thinking about the questions you're all going to ask after our next speaker, after Karina's come up. But just some thoughts there, perhaps, from Quay's excellent presentation and overview of what DP World are doing. Great to see what's happening in Southampton, by the way. My good friend and former colleague John Trenchard there, getting all those boxes on trains. Rail is a good move. Let's get all these boxes off the road and put them on trains. I'm a big believer in that. And it's not all about the software and the algorithms, is it? It's all about also the hardware, the hard tech, the cranes, the spreaders, and all the things that we need to move this cargo around the world. So we need a good mix, right, of this new tech and the old tech. I think if we gave ourselves a school report right now for the industry, it would be can do better. Yeah, I think that was sort of what Quay was trying to allude to. We can do better, and we should fix things. And let's expand upon that in the Q&A at the end. Another good thing was, I wonder whether the AI has the same amazing memory that an elephant does. So there's another thought for... But anyway, let's move on. And I would like to introduce Karina Kelson from APM Terminals. Karina is the Senior Program Leader for Hub Integration at APMT. And she's focusing on engaging and performing performance with hub terminals and increasing data sharing, certainly previously in some of her previous roles with Maersk, which are used to power advanced digital products. So a lot of wealth of experience we have up on the stage here with Karina as well. Karina and team now are heavily focused on the integration and collaboration of building Hapag-Lloyd into the Gemini collaboration with Maersk. And I think there was an announcement the last few days or last week that the Gemini collaboration will be using APM Terminals network of terminals around the world. Karina previously had leadership positions within Maersk, and she has a PhD from the University of Aarhus and has developed algorithms for routing and scheduling. Routing and scheduling, that's what it's all about. We cannot forget in the port industry that the port is that medium between sea and land. We often do, even in a room like this in an industry conference. I once remember moderating or asking a floor how many people had ever been to sea. And like 3 people put their hand up in a room of 500. So we must remember that what we're doing here is being the service provider to the shipping line to handle their cargo as efficiently and safely as possible and get their ship in and out in a timely manner. And I'm sure Karina has vast experience and will expand upon that. So please, Karina.
Well, thank you for that very impressive introduction, and thank you, Kate, for a very interesting presentation. It was a little hard to hear, I have to admit, sitting here because there's a lot of noise from the background, and I think hopefully you guys get the benefit of the speakers, so I hope you can actually hear, because back here it's all background noise. So also apologies up front if I get a little distracted by the noise. I think the majority of my presentations have been in academic forums where it's a lot more quiet. So apologies up front if I get scatterbrained. So as Paul mentioned, I think Kay's presentation took us a really wide view. And I think what I want to do is bring it down and go very detailed. So what I want to introduce you to is Gemini and how we as an APMT can actually make a difference, how we actually make that, or at least help make that a success. We obviously can't do it on our own, but I do think that we have a pivotal role to play to actually make it happen. So I'll start by just introducing you to what Gemini is, just in case that anybody hasn't seen everything that's been in the news. So, and just to be clear, the network that's kind of imposed on this map is not the Gemini network. That is an AIS view of what Maersk vessels have done in the past. The Gemini network is an east-west trade collaboration. So it's based on 26 mainliner services, which in turn are centered around 12 hubs. 12 of these hubs are not 12. 10 of these hubs are either owned or controlled by either Hapag or Maersk, from a Maersk perspective through APMT. And I'm actually going to focus on what we're doing for 7 of these specific hubs. In these hubs, we are going to connect 32 regional shuttle services that basically connects the rest of the major ports into these hubs. This shows you why the hubs are going to be such a pivotal part of this network. If these hubs do not work, the network is not going to work. There's going to be about 300 vessels running this network with a staggering 3.4 million TEU. So it's a really big network. From a customer perspective, this is all about schedule reliability so that we can deliver to the customer every time. They're actually looking at, when fully implemented, it needs to be above 90% schedule reliable. I think a lot of shipping lines right now are hovering around the 50, so 90 is really, really far. So it's a momentum change that we need to do. You say, schedule reliability is nice, but if we can't connect in the hubs, then it still won't work. The customer still won't get their cargo. So that's another aspect. The hubs. Okay. Sorry if you can't hear me. Apparently there's a problem with the sound. Okay, but the hubs really have to be able to connect the cargo for the network to work. So you can argue that's a lot of change. Why do we think that we have what it takes from an APMT perspective? So the ambition from an APMT perspective is to be the world's best operator, which is kind of daunting to say when you have our dear friends from DP World sitting here. But still, that is still the ambition. And we plan to achieve that through constantly lifting the standards for what our customers can expect from what. And we do that in all our key locations across the globe. But for today, I really want us to focus on the hubs. Because, as I mentioned, these are pivotal in the Gemini network. I think it's obvious, well, it's not obvious because the slide hasn't shifted. There we go. If you look at this and you remember that your Gemini network is an east-west trade, then you can also see that the APMT hub terminals are ideally located to serve that network, at least in, you say, normal circumstances. I know the Red Sea current situation is putting a bit of a spanner in that, but under normal circumstances, it's ideally located. There's a lot of work involved in getting the Gemini to work. And you say the work started a long time before the announcement was made. I would like to highlight to you 3 areas that we've been working on for quite a while, and which will be crucial in supporting the Gemini network. And you can say from our perspective, these are the proof points that we can actually do this. So first and foremost, operational excellence. So over the last 2 years, APMT has actually been able to decrease the vessel stay times by 15 to 20%. As Paul mentioned, we should never forget as operators that this is really about our customers, and this is a direct bottom line impact for the shipping lines, either to sail slower, have less vessels on their services, or other things like that. So there's a lot of impact for the vessel owners and shipping lines for this. Then, second point is that we invested heavily in our hubs. There's been a lot in the news. So I think I'll stick to we invested a lot and not say exactly what's been done. But this is really to make sure that the terminals have the size and the capabilities that are required. I think to the sustainability point that was mentioned before, this is of course also minded on electrification, ensuring that that whole sustainability concept and ideas that's taken into it as we invest, because these are long-term investments and they're really, really big. Then on the last point, this is about integrated planning. So this is about looking at, you say, the whole supply chain. Rather than just looking at it from a terminal perspective, we're trying to integrate, especially with the shipping line. So in this case, particularly with Maersk, where we really integrated everything from processes, systems, and even to some extent people, to get a much better planning, because we can look at it from a holistic perspective, weighing both the shipping line and the terminal benefits. So this is what we've already done. It's quite a lot, and it's both been time-consuming and costly, but there's more to come. So aside from obviously finalizing all those building projects that's going on, we're building on the success that we've already had, and we're continuing from a tech perspective on doubling down on what we've already done. So first and foremost, continuing the lean journey that we're on on our operational excellence, and to ensure that we can consistently deliver the high performance. Because one thing, again, coming back to the customer, is about, it's great that you have good performance, but if you're not consistent about it, it's not actually useful for the customer. They need to have that consistent high delivery every single week, every single day, not on a one-off port call. To support these two areas, we are, as I said, doubling down our tech developments. And I want to go into 3 examples of things that we're doing to support the Gemini network from an APMT perspective. So the first one is, the first 2 actually are related to digital twins. I won't introduce them or introduce digital twins, because based on Keith's comments, I think we're all aware of what that is. I think one thing on this graph, I've mapped a few of the items that we've looked at in the past or in the present, things that we've considered using digital twins for. As Paul mentioned, we had a conversation right before we started where I advocate that instead of taking a technology and then building it out and then going back and be, okay, dear business, can you use this? We turn it around and we really look at, okay, what are the business problems we have? And then how do we solve them? Looking at all the tools in the toolbox, not being predetermined that it needs to be something specific we use for the solution. However, we have found a lot of things that we would maybe use digital twins for. And what we've found is that generally speaking, there's 2 parameters that we can base them on and when we want to look into them. So one is the time frame. So how long of a time frame are we simulating or looking at from a digital twin perspective? And also, how much integration or data does that then require? And it seems to come out on a somewhat straight line where the shorter time you want to simulate, the more data and integrations you actually need, because the more accurate the data has to be to what the terminal can actually see right now. Maybe one thing to mention is that we're heavily focusing on simulation digital twins. So there's a lot of different ways of doing digital twins, and we've focused on simulation for now, which we mainly used for analytical outcomes, so that we support the terminals in making decisions based on these tools, or the systems do, we don't. So I want to dig into 2 of these use cases. One is the performer assessment, and the other one is the berth planner assessment. Both of these are very critical to the Gemini collaboration, but they also showcase some of what's mentioned before, this thing about how do we share data across, because they do not work without all the stakeholders being sharing data. So if we look at a digital twin for a performance assessment, so for Gemini, what we're looking at is building a digital twin that can actually assess the performance that are being suggested by the two shipping lines. We don't look at them from a network perspective, of course, because that's not our area, but we're looking at them from a hub perspective. So how well is the hub going to be able to perform these performers? What are the guardrails that we need to put in place? Where are the weak points of the performer vis-a-vis when you consider it from a terminal perspective? There's a lot of data that's required for this. You can say it's not necessarily super detailed because it's information and a reality that doesn't exist yet. In this case, as I mentioned, we're still building out our hub terminals, which means that the terminals we're simulating, they don't actually exist yet. And the network or performance that we want to simulate, they don't actually exist yet either. And we're trying to build a network that's operating in a different way. So we need to be very careful about using the past to predict the future. This is why we're using the simulation and building it up. It's also the reason why sharing data across between Hapag, Maersk, and APMT is required for this model to work. If we try to build it up purely from an APMT perspective, we would miss all the complexity of the new network. And we're building it up based on our past experience, I would argue straight off say, wouldn't work. That performer would never work. So we have to get that knowledge that sits in the shipping line to actually look at whether it will work or not. For the customers, from their perspective, what you say eventually, because not right now, but eventually what they will get out of us having this capability is actually that the network and the performance are going to be much more resilient, because we've been able to test them to a much greater extent before we go live. So you say that is the beauty of a digital twin in this case. It allows us to play around with alternate reality before we make it a reality. Because once the network is playing, once the terminals are up and running, we can't start playing, it's too late. A lot of these decisions have to be taken up front. So you say that's really where we find the power of the digital twin. So hopefully it will give them a highly reliable network in the future. Then to the second example, which is then, now we're going into the here and now. Same area, berth planning, but now we're actually looking at what are we going to do next week? What are we going to do 2 weeks from now? What we're doing here, and I think, I forget who, one of the two gentlemen mentioned this, but we have this tendency from a terminal perspective, we look at the terminal. And then coming from the shipping line, I can promise you, they stand on the shipping line side and they look from ocean and to the quay. These two worlds, they don't really mesh, it seems. So what we're trying to do here is say, we have the berth plan, which is from the ocean and onto the quay. That's great. And what we're really doing is saying, hang on a minute. Let's just check how that berth plan actually works for the terminal. So the simulation actually goes in and says, okay, this is the berth planner input. Now, how does that look once I actually consider how the terminal would work? The yard and the constraints that we have with equipment and people and things like that. And then you can feed it back and you get this iterative loop where the two connect. And all of a sudden we can tie together the ocean side and the terminal side to get one version of, reality as it's going to play out. Again, data sharing is crucial in this context. It's on a completely different level in this instance because it's much more detailed. All of a sudden, we need to know, okay, what exactly are you actually going to put on these vessels that you're going to come in to our terminals? Where is it going? We don't really care about where it's coming from, but once it's on the vessel, what other vessel do you want it on? Because that matters in terms of where we put it in our yard, for example. So the information level just goes up, so it becomes a lot more detailed. For the customers, again, there's a huge benefit in this, because all of a sudden we get a much more resilient birth plan because we've tested it both from an ocean side and a terminal side, which it really allows us to make sure that it's executable. Yes, random events are still going to happen, but at the starting point, it is much more resilient, and we're much more likely to be able to execute what we plan. From a customer perspective, this obviously means that they're actually going to see the transshipment that they're expecting, because these are mainly transshipment terminals. So I hope that these two examples kind of give at least a flavor for some of the things that we're using digital twins for within APMT. And also, frame the fact that at least for these two instances, we do need data both from a shipping line perspective and from the terminal. So the last example, and I'm sorry, I wanted to stay within one area, so I picked another example within the berth planning arena, just so we could stay kind of within the same space. Also gives an indication of how much we can actually do with our digital technology, even within a small space. So this is about berth planning. So you can say, I talked to you about the digital twin, looks at it from a yard perspective and taking into account the ocean perspective. But what if we could actually already build some of that in when we do the berth plan? So this is what we've tried to do with this optimization. So basically, within our planning tool, we've built an optimization that looks at finding the best berth plan. And then you can be like, okay, what does best mean? That really depends. So in this particular case, we've taken what are the priorities in this case for Maersk, because they're the major customers at the moment in the hubs, and the terminal. And then we said, okay, what are the parameters that we need to optimize for? And that's what we're doing. Works really nicely so far. We're only rolling it out so far. We have it in 5 of our hubs. We've seen a lot of saving in terms of fuel, both for the shipping line and, well, mainly for the shipping line, and then a little bit from an APMT perspective. But we've also seen that we've been able to connect a lot of cargo that would otherwise have lost the connections. Obviously great for the customers, but actually from a terminal perspective, something we really appreciate as well, because having those boxes sitting around for an additional 7 days, that's not great either. Another benefit that this creates is that now this is the way that we work. From an operator perspective, we've now gone away with, but I feel, I think, I would like. No, there's a company-driven way of figuring out what is the best berth plan. That also means that now that we're going into the Gemini collaboration, we can, from a central perspective, develop a new prioritization that then just flows through the system. And then instead of having to do a lot of change management, getting, different companies, different people to accept a new reality, the system will do it for them. Change management is still required, but it's a lot lighter touch than it would have been if we were to educate all of the operators in terms of this is now what the shipping line wants, this is now what we want, and this is the trade-off we want you to take. So it takes a lot of the, uncertainty out of it and takes it away from our front line of people. They don't need to bother about this. They get an answer and they can just start executing based on this. All right, enough about berth planning. So in all the examples that I've shared, it's all about data sharing. I think there's a lot of things that you need to consider before you start sharing data. There's 3 things that we generally look at before we just kind of jump straight in. The first one is what's the value versus the risk? Because as soon as you start sharing data, there's a risk. Well, I guess not every data is risky, but most of the data that we share within our industry, there is some risk return. We actually had a really good example a couple of months ago with some data that we wanted to share. So we'd agreed, we spent too much time communicating within you say, the ecosystem of the ports about what's the time of cargo completion and thus the time of departure. Way too much time. We need to find a better way. Okay, terminal, we'll start sharing your data with the community about what's the time you're expecting of a cargo completion. You'll get rid of all the emails, WhatsApp, phone calls, pigeons, whatever is happening in your terminal. And we were kind of expecting them to be all like, yay! They weren't, because basically a comment was like, yeah, so instead of having these phone calls where I can control the data that I tell them, you're just going to let it flow, and I'm going to spend much more time post-mortem explaining why the estimated time of completion changed. So they're like, absolutely not. So means from, you say, a central perspective, we're going to have to take a step back because from their perspective, the risk was actually greater than the value they would achieve. Then if you're looking at safeguarding the data, when we're building applications, we always ensure that we store this data in a safe way when we receive it. We have cases where it's actually, we have Chinese walls so that even the development team can't see it. And in some cases, we actually ask the sender, so shipping line or something like that, to disguise the data before they send it because it's simply too sensitive and we don't want to have it. The risk would simply be too big. I think that we've proven through the applications that we have that we are actually capable of doing this, and we're able to do it safely. So we also do it from a terminal perspective. So we don't just show all the data to all the terminals. Even within PMT, we actually ensure that they only see their own data because they're JV partners. There are still competitive or competition or can be between the different terminals, and we don't want anything that could encourage the wrong behavior. So we also split up between the terminals so they only see their own data. Then the last point is legal compliance. I think this is just, I don't know what you say, like the basis of it all, right? Ensuring that we are already and always legal compliant with our partners when we share data. What we are finding, though, interestingly enough, is that not everybody in the industry is super aware of it. And a lot of people are actually saying, but just give me everything. Where it's like, no, actually, this is information you can't see. And it's actually in all directions. And I find that rather surprising that with the lawsuits that have been, maybe not necessarily in our industry, but at least globally, that we are not more aware of this pitfall, which can be really, really expensive if you're caught in the wrong way. So this is something that I really encourage everybody we work with to really look into and consider. All right, so in conclusion, I really hope that these examples that I've shown you show how, APMT, our hub terminals, how they're going to support the reliability and the resilience of the Gemini network, and then therefore also the success of the corporation. In addition, I also hope that you've gotten a little bit of insights into data sharing and how we do that with all the different players in our ecosystem and the pitfalls that there may or may not be depending on how you act on it. So that was it for me. Thank you very much.
Round of applause, please, for Karina. Well, thank you, Karina. I think everybody could agree that was a masterclass in how to set up a new network and the importance of the hubs. The hubs have to be resilient, and we are very reliant on those hubs because at the end of the day, the hubs are critical to that network. Interestingly enough, it's not easy to set up a hub. We've seen recently with the Red Sea crisis that you can't suddenly have a pop-up hub, right? A pop-up hub, because there are no terminals, for example, in Southern Africa, which can take 24,000 TEU ships. So you're having some long transit times now, of course, with containers which perhaps would have been going to the east coast of East and Southern Africa are ending up even as far as Tanjung Pelepas in Malaysia and Salalah and coming back south again because they can't be transshipped in South Africa, Namibia, or Mozambique, somewhere like that. So look, we've got some minutes. I'm getting the nod from the conference producer that we've got some time for some questions. We have the wonderful Hannah out there somewhere, who is going to distribute, Hannah, great job, microphones. Please, if you do ask a question, please state your name and your organization. Try to keep your question brief, if possible. I'm going to kick it off just to give you a few more minutes to think about something. We finished with Karina's view on, or let's say APM Terminal's view on data sharing. So, Kwe, perhaps I could actually start, put that question to you. Data sharing is obviously inevitable in these examples that you've both given. You have to share data between terminals. You have to share data between carriers. There are obviously legal and security concerns, but just your thoughts on sharing data.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's on. Okay, thanks. Going back to data sharing, I think historically we've been an industry that has been quite reluctant to share data. Everyone has a feeling that data, their own data is very beneficial to have other organizations' data, but somehow their own data are slightly off limits. I know it's a bit of a oxymoron, but that's how the industry has progressed over time. I think it's more historically when you look at how businesses have operated in our industry, where each port terminal itself has ran as its own self-contained entity. And that's why a lot of times it's been very inward-looking. To first understand the benefits of sharing data outwardly, a lot of times organizations almost need to look inwardly as to actually, are you sharing the right data in your own organizations? I mean, do the right people in your organization have access to the data they need to perform the capabilities they want? Because I think that's where it starts first, in understanding actually how you're using data for your own business, for your own benefit, to benefit yourself and your customers and so forth. The other part of sharing data, I think, is also about the mechanisms to enable this. I think we were one of the very first industries to transfer data through EDI and so forth, but at the same time, the last industry to sort of migrate off fax machines as well. So it's kind of an oxymoron where we were at one point a leading edge of taking up tech, and at the same time, still having a lot of legacy tech in our business. And that's where, when you talk about sharing data, how are we sharing data? In what formats, in what capacities, in what capabilities? And actually, are there the right standards for us to do that? So I think there are really good things in the industry now, such as TIC 4.0 and others, which actually allows us to normalize kind of standards we want to share and so forth. And then from then onwards, I think then that actually will realize the actual real benefits of data sharing and so forth. And I think at the same time also, organizations are reluctant because actually they don't know how good or bad their data is at the same time. They know their data is precious, somewhat, but they don't understand how good or bad it is. And I think it's an oxymoron where you talk about, organizations creating data lakes and so forth, and without the right tools and people and capability and processes, it kind of almost becomes like a data swamp. Yeah, you have too much of something that you don't truly understand. And when you talk about data earlier on, I think people are looking at it as a gold mine, as in I can really monetize this, I can do more operational efficiencies if I share with others. Great things will happen. But what's almost the first step is actually to have a capability to assess your own sort of data landscape, because otherwise it almost becomes like a landmine, right? You're putting in things out that you can't trust. And then all of a sudden you're sharing it, which, further doubts your reasoning to wanting to share it and collaborate. So it takes a bit of work, and I think for more sort of greenfield organizations, it should be something you should look straight away. And likewise, for more mature organizations, there's no perfect time to start or think about it. I think you need to sort of think about it now to actually benefit from it going forwards.
Excellent, Quay. That's great stuff. I'd just like to give Karina a quick chance to add on any thoughts on that issue. Yeah.
Thank you, because... Okay, is that actually working?
Yeah, can you speak close to the...
Okay. That is very close. Okay, I just wanted to expand on one point. So this thing about standardization and the legacy, I think that's actually one of the key complications that we have, is that whenever we're trying to integrate or sharing data, then because we don't have a standard or there is a standard, but we're not adhering to it because we have a 20-year-old legacy system that doesn't allow for it, it actually means that we end up building a lot of interim things to translate. So that makes the whole data sharing a lot more expensive than it would have been had we had the standards and not had the legacy. So I think pursuing these standards, whether it's TIC or DCSA from a shipping line perspective, yes, it's potentially annoying and not super sexy to do, but I think from a pure hygiene perspective, it's something that we really should be investing in.
Thank you, Karina. Question from the floor? Yes, please, sir.
Thank you very much. Chris Kosmala from Airport. I have a question, Karina, a little bit more technical. This is relating to the comments that you made about integrated planning between the carrier and the terminal. I know that from memory, I think that you'll be also running 200 vessels on the feeder network, which will actually make it much more of a supply chain solution rather than just simply a hub-to-hub flow. You didn't mention anything about planning of those guys, and that's a little bit more chaotic world, as we know, right? You didn't mention anything about planning those guys in. So obviously they will not be supplying berthing plans to you. You'll be telling them when to show up and so on, and you'll be trying to coordinate the flow of the containers so they actually do not miss the connecting mainline, right? Have you given some thought to this, or this is kind of like a stage 2 of that integrated planning between the carrier and APMT?
So they are actually an integrated part in stages, you're right. So it depends a little bit on whether, taking it from a hub perspective, it depends a little bit on whether you say our key carrier has control, because a lot of the feeder companies are very closely tied to one shipping line, in which case they can often say, when do you want to come? This is when you need to come. And in that case, we actually take it into account in our optimization of the berth lineup, because as you're saying, it has to happen because that's what's feeding the big vessels or being fed. So from a terminal perspective, we need them to be in the right spots on the berth plan, because otherwise we're going to clog up the terminal. So absolutely, it's something we look at. You say the ones that, you say, in this case, Maersk controls the schedule, or can at least heavily control the schedule. Those are the ones that we automatically take into account. Exactly. The others are next stage, because there's a different level of collaboration required.
Thank you, Karina. Do we have any more questions from the floor? Yes, please.
My question is for Karina. This is Oscar from Nexport. Actually, continuation to the question from Chris Kosmala. In all those hubs, what about the port services, meaning the pilots, the tugboats, the maneuvering schedule? How you integrate that in your digital twin?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say we don't, not enough. And part of that is actually because every terminal or every port does it differently. So some ports will have a system that we actually need to integrate with. Others, we are the port. And it's different in every place. And it's back to the standards. There's not a standardized way of doing this. And how do you build? I mean, yes, you can say I'm responsible for the hubs. I can go and build 7 dedicated solutions. But basically, I'd be building 7 solutions. It's not scalable, because really what we need is something that's scalable across all the APMT terminals, all the DP terminals, across all the shipping lines. But that's missing at the moment. But I think a lot of terminals, a lot of ports have tried. I think billions of dollars have been spent in this arena. A lot of failures. I don't know. I haven't seen the magic unicorn yet. Still waiting, though.
No, but good question, and I think that comes to also the integration between systems and the hardware. It is important that we remember, cargo has a weight, and everything that we design our ports is actually about the weight of cargo. If you think about it, even the depth of water is to do with Archimedes' principle, and the draft of the ship, and the size of the cranes, and the efficiency We can do, things smarter as well. We can do tandem lifting, which has a benefit to berth utilization. So I just a thought there on connecting systems as well with this AI. But perhaps if we have another question from the audience, anywhere? Yeah, if you can speak up, please, because the sound is not so clear at the back here.
Sure. Mike Mundy, Port Strategy. Again, my question's a bit of a continuation from the previous ones. I'm just wondering where in your closed system, the integrated system between Hapag-Lloyd and between Maersk, and the terminal setup, is there still room in this system for a third-party carrier? Will they, if there is room within that system, will they achieve a level playing field?
So the question from Mike was, is there room in your system to accommodate another carrier as well as the Gemini collaboration?
So you can say, generally speaking, the systems that we're creating, yes, you can. They will need to share the data. So for example, let's take the 2 digital twins that I talked about. They would have to share the data that's required, but then, say from a terminal perspective, this is going to sound a little harsh. I don't really care about which carrier it is, right? From a system perspective, anybody would be welcomed, and our facilities are multi-carrier facilities. You say on the berth planning optimization, then that becomes tricky. But then we would probably set aside certain space that was for that particular third-party carrier, unless they're part of the Gemini network. That's a little bit more tricky.
Quay, perhaps interested on DP World's thoughts on multi-carrier. How do you handle multiple customers and data in your terminals?
Yeah, so obviously, as a carrier-neutral kind of operator, we are, well versed and well facilitated in doing that. And obviously, sometimes there is I would say, it depends on the jurisdiction and also the technology maturity of the region as well. I think we're assuming, looking at where we are from Rotterdam, like the whole world is similar to Rotterdam, right? And we know that's not true, especially in a lot of the markets that DP World operate in as well. So it's understanding your markets, the maturity of your markets, having the systems that can, cater for, I would say, less mature kind of operators, both from the inland perspective, but also from the waterside perspective as well. And then, going back to systems, I think Karina mentioned earlier, is about not looking at them as systems of applications, but actually looking for them as products, that can be reutilized and actually kind of mass kind of deployed in more locations and so forth. And, going back to kind of what we talked about, the standards and other things as well that you need to factor in. But sometimes we do slightly overthink it in our industry to be true. And that's why good things, they say, take time. I think the things in our industry must be amazing because they take too much time.
That's a great segue into my sort of final summing up. I think we've had a really interesting session this morning. Clearly, there's a lot of work to do. As I said, if we gave ourselves a school report for the industry on tech, can do better. We've heard about the elephant in the room and the fact that AI is coming to a terminal near you soon, if it's not already there. We heard from Karina on the wonderful things that are going to be in place very soon for the Gemini cooperation between Maersk Line and Hapag-Lloyd, visiting APM terminals and Hapag's terminals. Quay very eloquently has explained some very difficult concepts in IT and tech and AI, which I think we've all appreciated. So I think there's time before the next session for you to grab a coffee and wander around the exhibition floor. There is a wonderful session coming up at 12 o'clock on clean tech, which you should not miss. But for now, I'd like to give you could you give a big round of applause for our speakers, Quay and Karina. Thank you very much.